Hello everyone, welcome to the Montana Farm Bureau Field Notes podcast. My name is Haley Drugsma. For those of you who don't know me, I am the digital communications lead here at the Montana Farm Bureau Federation. I want to give you some background on this podcast before we get into it so you know what to expect and how this all came to be. This project has been in the works for quite a while, with Nick Courville, our current Young Farmers and Ranchers Committee state chair, going through our ACE Advocate, Communicate, Educate Leadership program. For his final project in the class, his goal was to start up a podcast, and he's been leading the charge by recording several episodes. Going forward, the structure of the podcast will feature a young farmer and rancher member in the first week of every month, which is today. There will be an Ag News Wire audio version of our bi-weekly e-newsletter in the second and fourth weeks of every month. In the third week of the month is a bit of a wild card with our pros and producers feature. This might be a member, an agriculture-adjacent professional, one of your favorite agriculture influencers, researchers making major advancements in the field, legislators, anyone who will bring you exciting, pertinent information about agriculture. With that, you can expect these episodes to be hosted by me, Nick, or both of us simultaneously. Today, Nick and Buddy Cheff, Northwest County's Farm Bureau president, are sitting down with Ryan O'Halloran of O'Halloran Family Ranch in Ronan to discuss his journey as a first-generation agriculturalist. If any of you have anything you'd like to learn about or someone you'd want to see us bring on the podcast, whether that's you or someone you know, please shoot me an email at haleyd@mfbf.org. That's HALEYD@mfbf.org. With that, I'll let Nick, Buddy, and Ryan take it away.
In front of me, I have Ryan O'Halloran. My first question to you, Ryan, is going to be, tell us about your operation, or at least let's start with a name. What do you guys call yourselves?
Sure. Well, right now we're calling ourselves O'Halloran Cattle Company, which is what we're running with right now, even though we're kind of a farm at the moment, not a cattle company strictly. We're raising moderator Angus, which is registered through the Aberdeen Angus Association. We're also growing chickens and meat birds and hens for eggs, and we grow and finish pork to sell as wholes or in the individual cut. I think the direction our operation wants to head in the future would be probably direct to sale, strictly individual cut pork and beef and poultry, as well as expanding our registered herd and maybe eventually getting into some seed stock aspects of the business.
So far, what's your favorite part of it? You doesn't have to be your most productive, but which ones do you just kind of enjoy seeing every day?
The cows are always going to be number one for me. It's my favorite thing. I could go out there and sit up and watch them graze or eat hay all day. It's just fun to be around the cows. Pigs are pigs. They're some of them have good personalities and some of them are pigs.
You did a great job describing it. Where is your operation? Where are you guys centered at?
Right. So we're located on the border of Ronan and Charlotte, Montana. Beautiful tucked back behind the foothills there. Get a nice view of the mountain range. Pretty good spot. Can't complain one bit.
Perfect. And so this is supposed to be about like first generation. How'd you get into agriculture? My first question is going to be, what was the draw for you and what connected you to want to even be a part of agriculture?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird story, and it doesn't really make all that much sense. But I don't have any agriculture background at all. I kind of got into it kind of middle of high school. I've seen some videos online, and it kind of piqued my interest of what I wanted to do with my life, and it looked like a lot better career. I went to school for HVAC, and I have my certifications for commercial, industrial, residential HVAC, and it wasn't something that I really wanted to see me doing for the rest of my life. Even though I got those out of high school, I never went into the trade. I did some plumbing with my father. He had a plumbing company, but even then I preferred cow over people. I don't know if I could say that.
You're fine.
Yeah, and just something about working with animals, livestock. It's just something that I think I felt right doing.
Yeah. And so you mentioned, the kind of draw or whatever. I was watching some videos in high school. Where is high school for you? Where do you originate from? Where is home?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in a small town. It was called South River, New Jersey. Not a very rural town by any means, but it was a pretty good place to grow up in, I think. And I ended up going to high school at East Brunswick Vocational School in East Brunswick, New Jersey. By that time, I was living in Edison, New Jersey, which was a bit of a commute away, about a 45-minute drive. So I had a lot of time to watch videos on the bus or during my commute, and that's basically how I got into seeing all the things about agriculture.
Nice. The next question we have for Ryan is, you just mentioned New Jersey. That's where you came from. You ended up in the Mission Valley of Montana. What was your journey like? How did you end up here? What was the draw to Montana?
Sure. Well, I'll take one step back and go to my first agriculture job, which was in New Jersey. I actually only worked on a farm for a year before I moved out here. But it was a long year, and I worked a lot of hours, so it was almost like 2 years of work, it felt like. But to go into that, there's a lot of agriculture in New Jersey. You'd be surprised. Not in the area I come from, but it's there, and mostly in the form of sweet corn and tomatoes and vegetables and dairy. There's not too many beef operations there, and I was able to find one that was about 50-minute drive from my house. It was kind of a commute. We started at between 5 and 7 a.m. and then I'd usually get home between 8 or 9 in the summer. So it was kind of a tough endeavor, but I enjoyed every minute of it. That was for sure. I learned a lot about just about everything, cow, pig, and chicken, and that was basically what I wanted to get experience. I wanted to get knowledge before I eventually made the attempt to come out west. And for some reason, Montana was always in my sights. I don't know if it was the beauty or my mom always talked about it, that she used to travel out here. And, one of the guys I did watch on YouTube, he was from Wyoming. So I kind of saw a little bit of similar landscape, and it's very different. An hour away is a different climate than, yeah.
So you get to Montana. Where was your first job at, and how long ago was that you finally made it here?
Yeah, my first job was in the Boulder Valley, just east of Butte. I got that job somehow. Those people are very good to me. They talked to me on the phone and set down the expectations and felt good enough to take a risk on me. I happen to know someone through my mother who has a ranch just down the road from them, and I think that helped me to get my foot in the door with some legitimacy. So it was kind of a lucky break there, and I think I got here. I left New Jersey basically right at the new year of 2020, and I drove out with, I don't know what to expect, but I got here and they put me through the ringer.
So what's your resume look like at that point? I mean, as far as agriculture goes, you said you kind of got your foot in the door. You knew some people that kind of helped you get there. Mm-hmm. Was it just the one job with the pork, chicken, and beef? That's what you had at that point?
Yeah, it was pretty much that 1 year there, and it was, like I said, it was a long 1 year. We were doing 12 days on, 2 days off for the most of it, and weekends you work by yourself, so it'd almost take you 3 hours to collect eggs by yourself on the weekends, which,
holy smoke.
Yeah, and that was kind of tough. There was really no time for nothing but work and sleep, and I think that actually helped my at least motivation and work ethic when I came out to Montana. I already knew how to work really hard and do the long hours and not do much for fun besides cattle and animals.
Yeah, and maybe this is me putting my neck out there, but you probably didn't know that many people, so was that easier too, that you could focus on work? You didn't have friends and stuff going out.
Yeah, no, I didn't. For them I worked, it was 5 days a week, and then Saturdays were a half day, and then usually kind of Sunday was hanging around the house and kind of getting ready physically, because it's a demanding job, so just making sure you're ready for Monday to come around, because there's usually probably a big job on the horizon.
Yeah. So describe to us, are you comfortable sharing who you went to work for?
Yeah, I will say their name. I think they'd be okay with that. I worked for Chris and Sandy Carey of the Dun Canyon Cattle Company, and they were, like I said, I left an operation in New Jersey that had pretty high standards, and I came to one to Montana that had even higher standards. So it was a good outfit for me to learn from, and I learned more than I could ever give to anyone else.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and shout out to them. I met them in San Antonio through our WhatsApp group chat. They were headed to dinner, and I had no one to eat with, so they invited me with them. Small world. Neither one of us knew that we knew Ryan, and I got some pretty cool stories that I can hold over his head for later. So, which I don't know if we'll get into, but if there's time, we might. So, describe a typical work day when you go to work for them at Dun Canyon.
Sure. I'll do like the probably seasonal, because the dailies were so different. It's hard to group them in one. I guess night calving for them, I would say I want to say, if I remember correctly, that was 6 nights a week, and that was 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. And that was basically from the first week of February to mid-March. And they calve in a way that I grown fond of, and it was, sort their heavies off, and they'd be in their heavy lot, which is I don't know, maybe a 50 to 100 acre pasture, and then they'd bring them in night to their barns, and the heifers would have their barn, and the cows would have their barn, and it was a really good way to calve. Bring them in, everyone got eyes on, and cleaning pens and making sure everything was going for the morning shift. I actually really liked that they in the barns they had a clipboard, and I'd write, when I saw the calves nursing, what time. I'd write when I gave them paste, and if there was issues, and it was, I'm sure, a help for them in the morning when they showed up and they knew what needed done yet.
That's awesome. So, I can kind of correlate because we know you, but a little bit of what you do now at your own operation has stemmed from what you probably learned there as far as the calving scenario and some of the things you do now, yeah?
Yeah, I'd say the place I worked for in New Jersey was kind of like regenerative agriculture farm, rotational grazing, and chickens on pasture, and then the outfit in Montana was maybe a little more conventional. And I think I was able to take, at least personally, the best aspects of both and kind of put them into my operation. And not saying that, I learned a lot from grazing from them too, and they do rotational graze their meadows in the summer, and that was really, really cool to see how they grazed, and I learned a lot from that as well. So,
just so I can kind of keep track, how long did you work at Dun Canyon?
2 summers and 2 winters.
So 2 years, yeah.
2 years.
And so that puts us 2020. You leave New Jersey, 2 years at Dun Canyon with the Careys, and then you end up in the Mission Valley after that. Yeah. Or is there something in between that?
Nope.
So you've talked about calving. One thing that I kind of envy you for, and when I first met you, kind of what our first conversations was, your summer job, like range rider. Were you on like some line cabin somewhere, like no power, no?
No, it was actually, it was back there, and it was back there in kind of a quiet valley, off the beaten path.
Describe to us where, just so that listeners can see, Dun Canyon near Boulder. Summer range riding job was where?
Towards Phillipsburg, which I think is roughly a 3-hour drive.
Yeah,
maybe
that's a big spread.
A little less.
Yeah.
And I think they had cows scattered in some other places there, but my main job was to focus on their cattle in Phillipsburg.
And so describe to us a typical day there, living in a cabin and.
Yeah, the typical day was basically seeing what fence the elk destroyed at night and where the cattle were out in the morning. There was a lot. There was a lot of ground to cover. There was about 700 pair there, and they were scattered between the Forest Service, private land, which was very expansive. And so, one day I might be riding through the Forest Service for 5 or 6 hours, checking salt and looking for cows and making sure everything's all right up there. And then another day I might be or I might be fencing for a week straight. I try to get ahead of the cattle in their fenced off areas. I don't know, a couple days ahead, because like I said, those elk were kind of menaces, and that was probably one of the coolest things. I mean, all the elk that were there, and I think I've seen some stuff online about people complaining about cattle on public lands, and the amount of cattle up there is kind of, I mean, they know how many head are up there. They know how many can graze with those elk, and they manage it pretty well. We moved them every couple months. We go up there and move them to a new piece of grass, which they usually did by themselves, because they go where the grass is, and they don't leave too much, or they leave some behind for the elk, and they all thrive out there. And the cows might be up in the forest, and the elk might be down in your private meadows eating on the irrigated grass. So I think it was, what people don't see there is, I guess, how they both combine to make a perfectly functioning ecosystem.
Yep. And you mentioned riding. Was most of that horseback, four-wheeler?
Right.
What's riding when you're on the range?
When I was going through the forest checking cows, it's going to be a four-wheeler job. It's just, I mean, there's some decently well-maintained roads up there, and for how much ground you have to cover, being on a horse and packing salt blocks ain't something that I mean, sounds nice, but sometimes it just isn't realistic.
Yep.
Most of the horseback work was done gathering out of the forest or pushing them into the forest. Yeah.
What was the grazing season up there when you were on range? Like, what's the time frame?
Yeah, I think I got there, let's see, early May, like first week of May, and then I'd probably leave November 1st, roughly.
How often did they check in on you, or did someone bring you groceries, or like how did that part work?
I was about 35 to 45 minutes outside of town, so it wasn't too bad.
Yep.
I try not to go there too often, though, because I kind of like the quiet, peaceful, tranquil meadow. In the first year I was there, I was pretty green, so they were up there about every week helping me navigate some problems. And by the second year, it was maybe every other week or maybe 3 weeks in between. It just depends on when the cattle need to move, because sometimes you just, you got a bunch of heifers out there. Sometimes you just can't move them through the willows by yourself, even with dogs. You need a couple extra hands there and a couple extra paws.
Yeah. And so I want to touch on the dog thing too, but I want to tie in Natalie. Like, when does she come into the picture? You know, Natalie's your wife. We
Right.
know that, but for the listeners, like, when do you meet her? Does she come at this point?
I went, before I moved here, I was working at that farm in New Jersey, and I came out here on vacation, and I actually met Natalie then.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And believe it or not, Natalie's friend had that job with them before I did.
Perfect.
So I think that's might be how they originally got my resume, because I was posted on like Ranch World ads and stuff like that, looking for work. But I think that's how they got my resume, was through Natalie's friend.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people to people connection. I mean, that's the same way that I met the Carries at San Antonio Farm Bureau. Like, it's just people to people connection. So that's pretty cool. And I do envy you from seeing some of the picture and just visiting you and learning some stories that you had out on the range. Buddy, feel free to jump in. I have the paper in front of me on the questions, but if anything strikes your interest, feel free. One thing that I've been thinking about, is you mentioned 12 days on, 2 days off when you're in New Jersey. You mentioned, you're 30 to 45 minutes from town, by yourself at this range camp.
Yeah.
What drives you to stay in Egg now? Obviously, you've transitioned. You have a family. You live near Charlotte. It's a little more stable,
Right.
But what drives you in agriculture? I mean, I'm sure it wasn't the 3 hours of collecting eggs in New Jersey.
No.
Like, what's your drive to stay in it?
I think I always envisioned my own operation, and even now I envision what it could be, and I know I really wish I could take it there faster. I just don't have the funds to do it, and I think just what it could be is always the motivation to keep going. And then there was some times on both jobs where I wish I never saw a cow again. I mean, I guess that happens sometimes when you're having a bad day, but at the end of the day, coming home and maybe sitting by the fire on a cold fall evening, and after you just had a wreck, sometimes you miss that too.
Well, on the family side there, what's your future looking like? Are you wanting, when you guys get old enough to retire, you wanting to sell off and just kind of live a good life, or are you wanting to try and build something to hand down? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I always think, and most of the time it's not realistic, but I'm always thinking how to grow. How can I expand, and what can I do to get bigger? And sometimes it's unhealthy because you kind of forget what you have right now is pretty dang good. But I always dream about how I could be a bigger outfit, or how I could spend my day looking at my own cows and maybe not someone else's.
Yep. And I guess my question on the future is, right now you've mentioned chickens, meat, eggs, pork. What's the future look like for that? Like, how do you market it now? What are you working on for in the future? Like, how are you going to market those in the...
Yeah, I think that's something we're still trying to figure out. I think what I struggle with now is time. And sometimes, when you work full-time outside of your own place and you get home and you feed your cows and your pigs and your chickens, you don't want to do anything else. And sometimes that could really impact your growth of what you want. So I don't know. I think trying to stay goal-oriented and understand that you're not going to grow as fast as you thought you were going to grow is probably something you should realize before you even get into the business.
Yeah, during the discussion meet, that was in my opening statement. Was my 9 to 5 is working for the feed plant. My 6 to midnight is going home and doing the cow thing. So no, I can totally relate to that. What as far as marketing your products goes, do you guys have a meat depot license? Are you looking into that? How do you do the chicken side of it? I have no idea. I'm genuinely asking.
Yeah, so we're definitely looking into getting the meat depot license now. It's tough. I think it's tough trying to get our outbuilding situated where it seems like we get our building clean that has stores our meat, and I don't mean clean like it's dirty that you don't want to be in there, but I mean like picked up and straightened out and looking like a manicured site. And I think we'll get it clean, and a week later, just through life, it gets messy again. And I think before I which I called for the inspection, but I think before he comes out, what's been slowing me down is trying to make sure that that's squared away and going to be perfect.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Like, you might think it's dirty, and he shows up and be like, man, this is the most cleanest place I've ever seen.
But that's coming back to that 2 farms I worked for in the past, or farms and ranches, the standards were like this, so when mine go there, I don't feel comfortable.
So you guys are doing a permanent location. Is that what you're looking into? Or
yeah.
Is there a benefit to that versus mobile?
Well,
setup?
I think our goal is to start at the farmer's market and build up a clientele that maybe will take a weekend drive and see the beautiful Mission Mountains and then just come directly to us, and we don't have to go to those markets anymore to just support our business. But it, like I said, getting to those points just seems like one impossible jump after another. Yeah, sometimes.
There's a lot of roadblocks, for sure, to get started. Buddy just asked whether we're going to look at mobile or a structure. That structure, and this is me just trying to understand, is for the meat side of it. So how do you guys plan on marketing the meat birds or the eggs? Or are you already doing that? Or the pork, for instance?
That is a tricky question, because I really think like Missoula is going to be our spot to hit when it comes to selling the product that we produce. And I was just thinking the other day, it's something, when my dad was advertising his plumbing business, we'd have, all 4 boys in the back of the van, and we all have, envelopes with, business information, and we'd stop in a neighborhood and everyone gets a different house, and then you keep going until you've done the whole neighborhood. So I think something like that is something that I'm going to start doing here this summer.
Nice. Yeah. So I showed Ryan some of the questions we had prepared, and I'm going to go offset here. You've already talked about it a little bit, but do you do this full-time, or do you have a day job? Do you have a 9 to 5 that supports this, and eventually the future state looks like I'm home every day doing my own thing? What do you do right now during the day?
Yeah, so I work for outfit that's not too far from my place that is in the cow-calf pair business as well as the feeder business. I've been working for them since October, and I think it's been a good fit for me so far. And my wife as well works in town as a teacher at the local high school.
Yep. And, I mean, he says teacher, but local FFA advisor.
Oh, yes,
There's a lot
and,
more
and
that goes
agriculture,
with that.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
So you have a 9-to-5, you know, kind of support the egg habit.
Right.
What are some of the other roadblocks? I mean, outside of you mentioned it's hard to get started if you don't have the money to do it. Like a lot of your projects get put off. Like, how do you prioritize what you're gonna do? Like, is the goal always like we're gonna sell meat direct to the consumer, or what's like the number one priority for you guys?
For me, I'm probably pretty hot about trying to get our product out there and getting people to see it. I don't know. There's so many aspects we could take the business in. It's hard to pick on which one's going to be the most profitable for us now. So it's kind of a juggle between what makes sense. But I think we just need to take the first step in any direction to kind of get something rolling here.
Yeah, well, I'd definitely, any future Farm Bureau events that we have, if we're going to, you know, it's always an expense, but if a guy could donate a quarter pork or eggs for something, you know, if we're doing food.
Yeah.
You know, set up a sign, food sponsored by, you know, donated by whatever.
Right.
And then I think that'll get your name out there a little bit. You know, for us locally, our little group, we could help you in that sense. If you know,
Yeah.
It's always hard to bite the bullet and donate something like that, especially when you're starting out. I know we've done it a couple times, and it's only 10 pounds of burger here and there, but it'd be a way to push you in a direction, maybe get your name out.
Yeah. No, that's totally something to think about. And I think, well, I might have to circle back to this. I'm trying to think about what's in my head.
Well, you think, and I'm going to ask a question. I mean, sometimes the agriculture side of it, like what Buddy just brought up, we got kicked out of a farmer's market, which was one of our other podcast episodes, for bringing a live chicken. So, like, think to back in the day when people were marketing their animals and their product and stuff at a farmer's market, and then we show up to play a chicken bingo game and they ask us not to come back because we brought a live animal. So I mean, just the landscape where agriculture is perceived and stuff, and the farmer's market, you know, you mentioned starting one, you know, more locally, and I think that even the farmer's markets we have locally are so more geared towards like melted candles and different things like that. Like, there's not a lot of eggs showing up there, and that we're the black sheep when we show up with a chicken. They're like, man, we're not allowed to have live animals. Like, that's a sanitary issue. Like, okay, sorry. So I don't know if that gave you enough time to think, but it's hard to show up as yourself sometimes in the agriculture sector.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think that maybe comes with the disconnect of where people are getting their food for the most part. And I don't know the best way to get in touch with people. Sometimes you read some of the stuff on social media, and both ways. I mean, it goes both ways no matter what topic you're on, but it's hard to think some people say what they say with absolutely no education behind it, and how many people will agree with it. And I think that's super detrimental to any industry, and I don't know probably the best way to combat that, but...
Yeah. And that's, I mean, a lot of it's like peer-to-peer. We talked about it being, you have to be people-facing, you have to go tell your story. That kind of leads into our last question. You know, is there a group, an organization, certain people that have helped you along the way that kind of drive your passion for agriculture? You know, it can be family, it can be organization, it can be whatever, but just, you know, who helps you in your endeavors?
Yeah, well, first of all, I probably wouldn't get most of the stuff I get done without the help of my wife, Natalie. She's been super supportive and super helpful with any chore or working cows when I'm kind of being fresh at the mouth. She understands. So, yeah, I think she's probably been my biggest support. And then when it comes to, I don't know, keeping the...
Carries have been a pretty big help to you, it sounds like, too. Just
that's
listening
true.
to talk
Thank
about
you.
them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the carries have been amazing, and there's a reason I go back and help them at every chance I can get, because I like being around them, and they're always willing to teach you something or have a conversation with you. And yeah, I think people like that are some of the best people you'll ever meet. So very grateful for them.
And I was fishing a little bit, but, you know, you moving into a community where you don't really know anybody, what are some of the organizations that helped you kind of get connected in part of the community?
Yeah, and I think everything comes back really to my time at the local feed store here. I made so many connections working through them, whether it be getting introduced to Farm Bureau or meeting local people throughout the community that are always willing to help a hand or have a conversation with you. I think that's been a huge asset, and I don't think I'd be where I am today without making those connections through that job.
Nice. Buddy, you got any more for him?
I think we covered pretty much everything. I mean, we could talk for hours.
Yeah.
It's there's always time limits.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories that we just scraped on that you could probably talk for a mouthful for. So
cool. Well, that's all we have for this episode. Check back in with us later. Thanks.
And that wraps up Ryan O'Halloran's Young Farmer and Rancher feature. We are grateful to have him as part of our organization. To join the Montana Farm Bureau or learn more about ways to get involved in the voice of agriculture and the largest general agriculture organization in Montana, visit mfbf.org. Thanks, all you lovely members of the Farm Bureau family, for tuning in today. We'll catch you in the next one.